All right, welcome everyone. This is Monday, June the 1st, 2020. First is the reading of the call. Ms. Golden, please.
Yes. To the Aldermen of the City of Tullahoma, you and each of you are hereby notified that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Beer Board of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee is called to meet in a special called session on Monday, June 1st, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. at the Municipal Building to consider the following. 1. Ordinance number 1540, an ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee, adopting the annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021, for passage on the first of 3 readings. Number 2, and for the purpose of transacting any other business that may lawfully come before the board and waive any and all irregularities of the same. Roll call. Lane Curley.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Blanks.
Here.
Alderman Daniel Berry.
Here.
Alderman Rupa Blackwell.
Here.
Alderman Robin Dunn.
Here.
Alderman Ray Noes.
Here.
Alderman Jerry Mathis.
Here.
And 7 present, and I will pass this around so you can all sign it for the record, please.
Okay, you've heard the reading of the call and the roll call. We do have a quorum. Any questions on the reading of the call? Seeing none, we will proceed. We're very pleased that Reverend Don Dixon is with us this evening. Ask if Reverend Dixon would step to the podium and offer our invocation. Ask everyone to please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Eternal God, creator of all, during this pandemic, remind us the truth which has been voiced elsewhere. All of us are in this storm together, but not all of us are in the same boat. Bless this board, voted to represent all of us in Tullahoma, that as they begin the budget-making process, may work to include all, regardless of what boat people may be in. May they work for the common good during this terrible time. Give them discernment in these matters, and bless us at their efforts with a sense of unity that will touch all of us in Tullahoma. In thy name we pray. Amen. Join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Dixon. Appreciate you being here. All right, I'm not aware of any commendations, certificates, proclamations, awards, or special presentations this evening, so we will proceed with the agenda. Any comments from the citizens? Seeing none, we will proceed. Ready for board reports?
No report, sir.
Mr. Mathis, thank you. Mr. Berry?
No real reports. Do we have a birthday boy up here, though?
We do.
Oh, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you, Alderman Berry.
I did have a comm center meeting last week. Prepping to, there's possibility, there was a bill, I don't know how it went, but the county still may do something looking at separating, cutting the comm center off the county's budget. So there were some conversations about that. We don't know if it'll happen. We'll find out come budget season. And that was kind of the big conversation there. And then talking about some of the joint things and discussions that some of the chiefs have had in updating some of the equipment there. It's a really important service to the entire county. That's it, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Berry. Ms. Blackwell?
I have, we had a tourism council meeting this past, about 2 weeks ago, I think, and a Zoom meeting, of course, and we are moving forward with finding printing for the rack cards that we're putting out. I know that Mr. Brooks has gone to local vendors as well as other vendors and is looking for the best pricing and best bid, I guess, is what the verbiage is for that. We had a planning commission meeting as well since then. A couple things that came up on them were subdivisions, and I felt like when I tell people that we're talking about subdivisions, sometimes they freak out and think we're talking 40, neighborhoods. Sometimes those come up, but a lot of the times it's just like a 2-acre plot of land being divided into 2. So I wanted to say that. And I had one other thing that I think some of you know that I wanted to talk about as well. And I want to read this statement out to you all. But as a brown woman, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about the issues our country is dealing with right now. I prayed about whether to say something and doubted whether or not I should be a voice. But I want to say something right now, since we are on TV, directly to our African American community. I am sorry. I am heartbroken, and I hear and see your pain, the hundreds of years of oppression and the lack of change in a system that has led us to the events this past week. Upon writing this, I chatted with a high school schoolmate of mine. I'm not going to call him out by name, but he reminded me that Dr. King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are learning every day how to become better allies. I am. I know I'm trying, and I know everybody here is. And we know that your lives matter. If you need me, I'm here as your ally and your advocate. We all want a Tullahoma where every citizen feels like they belong here. And I know this isn't an easy task, and I promise to follow this statement with action. I will be hosting my next Coffee and Conversations, God willing with COVID, on July 2nd from 12 to 2 p.m. Still trying to figure out a location. But I'd encourage and like for members of our community, all members of our community, to come out and talk with me about their experience with race relations. Location TBD. So I'll put that out on my social media as well as send to the paper for when there what's happenings and stuff like that. And thank you to the paper for putting those out there.
Very nice.
And
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Appreciate your initiative, and very well said. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Blackwell. Dr. Blanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since it's glad to be back up here on the dais with everybody with masks on. Eventually, we'll get rid of the mask, hopefully. But it's glad to be in person rather than through the Zoom meetings. We've all become quite accustomed to Zoom meetings. I'd rather be in person than apart. Had a Duck River in-person meeting last week. We have plenty of water. The Normandy Reservoir is at full summer pool, probably a little bit higher. They're releasing quite a bit below Normandy. So, those of you that are kayakers or just occasional river rats or canoers or whatever, if you put in at the dam and go to Cortners, be super careful. There was a tragedy there this weekend at Cortners, and there's been, Mother Nature and the river can get you if the river's going fast. So be careful out there. TUA met a couple of Zoom meetings. This next time we will, in the last couple of months, we should meet in person. Everything's going well with the electric system. It's supposed to be at a national conference for the APPA next week, but they went virtual on that as well. So a lot of the meetings and stuff where there were going to be a lot of people together, they've either been postponed or put off for next year. If you're out and about, I would encourage you to wear a mask if you're out in public. I know they're aggravating. Some people up here are choking because they're not used to wearing them. But some of us have to wear them 8+ hours a day. And so it's a thing we need to do. Not specifically to keep myself safe, is to keep the ones that are at risk safe. I know there's some people that sort of wah about it, but this won't last forever, and we'll get through it. And it's good to see everybody's face up here tonight. And if you have to shop locally, and we appreciate it. That's all I have, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Blanks. Ms. Dunn.
Yes. Well, I will start with, I did a composting video with Lanham Library last week. We made a presentation. It was a live Facebook event, so that was really fun to be able to do that with them and talk about how important it is that we compost, that we can help offset a lot of our landfill use through composting. And if people are still interested in having a composter, they're available still at Public Works, right? Are they still there? Okay, and they can call 455-1768, and Jackie will help them out. So those are available through a grant that Carol Fulmer secured with Interlocal Solid Waste Authority. So thank you very much to Public Works and to Carol for all their hard work. We are installing the rain garden. The rain garden is happening. The rain garden is happening next week. So we'll get some schedules out. If you are wanting to volunteer, we're going to do that as safely as possible. So if you're interested in being a part of that, that's going to be at East Lincoln, and I'll send more word out about that. I'll be talking about it specifically at our Go Green meeting tomorrow night. That's going to be at 5 o'clock. We're going to be outside across the street from City Hall to kind of talk about it. I'm going to have the cube on display. So we'll have that. I created a cube out of a PVC pipe. So if you've got one of those, the trash carts, they're 96 gallons. You put them out 52 weeks out of the year. If you filled them up to the top, 96 gallons times 52 is almost 5,000 gallons. So in a cube shape, that's almost 9 feet tall, wide, and long. So each household in Tullahoma, if they were to fill that up all the way to the top, we're putting that out every single year in Tullahoma. And so that's 10,000 of those, because there's 10,000 trash carts. That's a layer that's 100 long, or a layer of 100 of those cubes, and it's 100 stories tall. So that's what we're doing, each year in Dyersburg. That's the reason why our Public Works Department is the second most expensive that we have, is because of what we are using it for. So I want to encourage all of our citizens to do what they can to offset those costs and to be just be responsible. We've got to let's take care of our neighborhood so that the people of Dyersburg can take care of their neighborhood, so that everybody can take care of their neighborhood. So that's going to be on display tomorrow. If you're wanting to join the Go Green meeting, that'll be 5 o'clock. And I have to say a big, big thank you to the Rice family of CFC Recycling. They are sponsoring decals that we're going to have. It's going to say "I" and the recycling sign, Tullahoma, and we're going to be giving those to our businesses who are recycling. So we have about 200 of those in town. So I can't wait to be able to share those with our businesses so that they can, whenever we've got people who are shopping Tullahoma, they can say, oh, yeah, these people are recycling and taking part in our free recycling program. So big, big thank you to CFC Recycling for sponsoring those. So that's all I have.
A lot of good information.
Lots of good stuff. So,
Good stuff.
yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. Mr. Nellis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As far as activities on the economic development front, we are having a TAEDC meeting for the first time tomorrow. It will be a virtual meeting. Tom will be hosting. And we've done a test drive today, and it worked just fine. Learned some things even with the test drive. We've already had one live airport board meeting that we had just last week. We spread out and did social distancing and had that meeting live at the airport. Some good things going on there. And I guess with the Planning Commission, we've been really struggling with that, it seems like it's been harder on Planning Commission meeting than it has been another thing. I don't know why, but anyway, we successfully had about 3. Our Planning Commission was the first meeting that we missed with having a live meeting. So we're doing well with that, and we did have that meeting, as Alderman Blackwell indicated last week, and that's going very well. So thank you, Alderman Berry, for the tip. Yesterday is my birthday, and it's a good one.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Hope it is a good one. Anything else?
That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, may I make an announcement?
Yes, you
Personal
may.
announcement. So I'd like to congratulate Evelyn Curley. She will have been married for 41 years tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It's hard to believe. Yeah. I say that because some of you might remember a couple of months ago, this lady from Lynchburg asked if I would marry her. And as I told her, and I told, I think, all of you, that I'm generally pleased with Evelyn and really had no, which I really got in some trouble for saying that. And she's probably watching right now. So I'm probably in trouble for that again. So anyway, 41 years tomorrow.
Wow,
Congratulations.
congratulations.
Okay, we're ready for the city attorney's report. Mr. Worsham, please, sir.
I don't have a report tonight, but I have a comment. Correct, that lady from Lynchburg was asking you if you would perform a marriage ceremony.
Oh,
You missed an
I
opportunity there.
I bet that was it.
You could do that.
Well, she never called me back.
We've been busy, but I don't have anything to report tonight.
Thank you. All right, ready for the city administrator's report. Ms. Moody, please.
I'm going to reserve all my time for the budget presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're ready for the consent agenda. We have 4 items. Item number 20-44, minutes of the May 11th 2020 regular meeting. 20-45, approve a memorandum of understanding with Tennessee Corrections Academy to use the City of Tullahoma's community centers as temporary emergency shelter in accordance with their emergency operations plan. 20-46, approve the appointment of Mr. Ken McKay as a member-at-large to the Arts Council of Tullahoma for the remainder of an unexpired term ending August 12th, 2022. 20-47, authorize the city administrator to negotiate a lease with Mr. Joe Keller, owner of London's, for a portion of Wall Street Alley. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second. Motion by Ms. Blackwell, seconded by Mr. Noes. All those in,
Mayor,
yes.
I hate, usually consent, we just vote right through. Item number 4, I'd like to discuss a little bit, just to, in my mind. That area there is the area that's blocked off, correct?
Ms. Moody.
There are bollards there on a regular basis, but they're removable for emergency
Well,
purposes.
The bollards were put up probably 5 years ago, correct? About,
Yeah, 3 to 5.
when they put the bollards up, I was against them putting the bollards up there 5 years ago. The bollards were in place the night that we voted to approve them. It was already a done deal, so to speak. And, you know, I'm still not in favor of blocking that alley. I'm not wanting to be against any kind of somebody improving their business or whatever, but that's city-owned property, you know. And I can understand what they're wanting to do there, and that would make sense. But I'm not going to support this when I didn't support them opening the alley back 5 years ago. And I was the lone wolf on that. But I talked to some business owners at that time about cutting that access point off. You know, if you want to cut through there, you have to go all the way around the block, which is not that big a deal, but it is in a way. So my deal at the time was they already installed, Public Works put that stuff up there before we ever voted it through that night. And am I not right about that, Rosemary? Do you remember?
I remember you saying something, but
Okay,
I don't.
I don't want, but that's just where, that's, you know, if the majority of the board supports that, that's fine, but, you know, that's, you know, if we negotiate a lease, the argument at the time was if we decide to want to go back and open it up, we can, but a lot of times, as a board, once we vote something through, it's hard to go back and change something, so, you know.
Can we pull that off
Can we
the
move it to
agenda?
the, yeah.
Just one comment about, you mentioned Public Works. They did not do that at their own initiative. They were directed to do so. So
Right, it was-
So I know you're not trying to throw
apologize
them
for
under the
that.
bus for that, but
Somebody in a position of authority advised them to do that.
right.
I think there would be a couple of options. So tonight on consent agenda, I was asking for the board's approval to negotiate a lease with Mr. Keller. That's why the actual lease is not ready for you to review. We haven't had back and forth negotiations yet. What's occurred is he's kind of talked to me about his ideas. This seemed like maybe the simplest solution to help him extend his beer permit and liquor license onto the property. I don't think it's the only way to solve that problem.
Yeah.
So we had Steve Worsham's drafted a lease, and then before we present it to Mr. Keller to kind of have the back and forth conversation, I wanted to get your approval to, in concept, negotiate a lease of the alley.
So that's all we're doing tonight, just approving that next step. So
But understanding what your concerns are, I definitely would carry that into
Well,
the
you know,
conversation.
some of us have been to New Orleans and walked up and down Bourbon Street, sometime in our life. Bourbon Street puts bollards up at night. During the day, that's an open thoroughfare.
Right.
And that was, my thing was, this was done, and we never did have a discussion to where that could have been one of the ideas. And it still could be. But, it's like, scratch that scab on me that's 5 years old today. When I looked at it, I was like, should I say anything? Yeah, I voted against it then, and I want you to know about it now. So that may be something we might want to think about. But those bollards are up there pretty much 24/7, 365 days a year. I don't know if they've ever been pulled up. They may have.
I think so, yeah.
Not
So do you mind if it?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, just go with this next step, then it's got to come back, and then we can hash it all out.
Okay,
Is that with everybody?
that's okay by me.
That's all we're doing, this first step.
Would it not be better to go ahead and see the lease prior to our voting?
Well, Mr. Keller's not seen it yet. It's just
I've only prepared a draft of the lease, and I've looked at it. We're going to talk to Mr. Keller about that, kind of in general, before we actually have a draft or something that you'll...
We'll have the lease in our agenda packet when we vote the next time.
correct.
I guess the question would be, if there was enough here to vote no to say no to doing it, should we go through all the trouble of paying to have the lease done? And
Well,
I think that's why you could consider pulling it off the consent agenda to vote on it individually, so you know if there's support for the concept.
Well, when I looked around a minute ago, there were 3 or 4 other heads that were nodding yes. They wanted just to go ahead and let them go through this part of the process anyway. I think we need to respect the fact that, we've got a merchant that wants to, expand the business. And for us to cut it off at this point is not very respectful to the merchant, actually. That we don't even give it a go, give it a try.
Well, I have a draft of the lease ready that I've already shared with Ms. Moody. We could have that lease for the agenda next week for y'all to look at. It's just the beginning of a document from which we can negotiate. It's already done.
Yeah, I think it's on the access issue. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why we want to retain ownership. And we're not advocating to sell the property, but to keep ownership and lease it so that we keep access for emergency purposes for the general public to use as a pedestrian way. I think I didn't know the issue about maybe keeping it open more times of the day. So that's really the crux of it. The term of the lease we haven't discussed. Is it a 1 year, then going to month after that, a longer number of years, and then any compensation for it hasn't been discussed. So those are the major pieces. I think everything else about the lease is pretty much a standard lease.
some of the issues, I have had some officers talk about it a couple times, and they don't like not being able to get through the alley, because now they have to park across the street. You can't just go in one officer. 2 or 3 of them got to come through. They've got to walk through, where that takes out the ability for them to patrol. I think if the lease would address some of those issues, then I'd be okay going forward looking at the lease. But I just don't want to.
But isn't there a parking lot back there that you can pull into?
It's full on Friday, Saturday night, and now you only got one parking lot because the other one's blocked off. So you're parking.
It's tough.
Yeah. Like, I'm all for, we talked, and I love what he's wanting to do there. But I think there's some issues that hopefully the lease will address.
All right, is that all right with everybody?
It's okay by me.
We've got 4 items on the consent agenda. All those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, vote green. Opposed, vote red. Motion passes 7-0. Let's see, Ms. Moody, I see no other old business. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we've got several items of new business. Agenda item 20-48, approve agreements between the City of Tullahoma and Tennessee Department of Transportation for highway rail grade crossing improvement projects at Hogan Street. Contract number CRR 070347 and Roosevelt Street. Contract number CRR 070349. Is there a motion to approve the agenda item 20-48?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Proper motion by Dr. Blank, seconded by Ms. Dunn. Any discussion?
Can I ask a quick question?
Director?
Oh, never mind. You already answered my question later, so I'm good. Yeah, never mind.
Okay, ready to vote? All those wishing to vote for agenda item 20-48, vote green. Opposed, vote red. Motion passes 7-0. Resolution number 1827, a resolution establishing the in lieu of tax payment for the Tullahoma Utilities Authority for fiscal year 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Dr. Blanks, second by Mr. Norris. Any discussion?
I'm trying to understand what this is.
Okay.
So Tullahoma Utilities is a public utility, and like governments, we don't pay taxes. But they do, in fairness to competition and the fact that they're private utilities that they compete with, they do make a payment in lieu of tax.
That's how, it's just the verbiage
That
of
is
it.
the equivalent of if they were to pay property taxes like private utilities. This is what they would pay.
Got it, thank you.
And there's a very precise formula you go through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, that's where it sits right now. It's with TVA. I don't think they have gotten final approval. TVA reviews the formula and the amount, so it could change slightly. But this is what we are budgeting based upon right now.
We're highly regulated by TVA on anything that we do.
Okay,
They have to get their stamp of approval, and that's where it is right now.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor of resolution number 1827, vote green. Opposed, vote red. Motion passes for 6-1. All right, ordinance number 1540, an ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee, adopting the annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021 for passage on the first of 3 readings. So let me get a motion and a second, and then I will defer to Ms. Moody for
We'll move to approve.
Second.
proper motion by Mr. Noah, seconded by Ms. Blackwell. So, Ms. Moody, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And let me, while she's getting set up, let me suggest that, particularly for the newer members, that should you have any questions, and this is a public document, would encourage you to request a meeting with Ms. Moody and sit down and go through it until you feel comfortable with it. She and Ms. Wilson and others have worked very, very hard to prepare this. Once again, and for the umpteenth year in a row, there's no property tax increase, and she will go over the assumptions that she has made in order to prepare this document. So, Ms. Moody, the floor is yours.
Passing out some highlights.
Of the 3.
No, just 2.
As you can imagine, this has been a pretty difficult budget year. It's like trying to work with a moving target. And we had a lot of discussion coming into this budget over whether we should even do maybe a continuing budget and kick the can a little further down the road. But at the state's encouragement, they really want to see us pass a budget. So what the approach we've taken has been to be very cautious in how we've budgeted, and I'll go into that in some detail. I would say, as you know, the COVID-19 has really affected us and continues to create a need for us to adjust how we operate and provide services. I'm very proud of our city employees. I feel like they've really risen to the occasion in the face of what are constantly evolving events. Haven't seen them miss a beat doing it, and I really give all the credit to them and the leadership of our department heads who are all here tonight. I always ask them to attend the budget meetings. I believe that we've taken what are reasonable and financially responsible steps to contain costs across the board, while we have maintained our service levels in all of our most essential areas. Tonight's presentation, I like to do it in two parts. Those of you that were here last year remember we actually did this on 2 different nights, covering revenues one night and expenditures the next. So again, I know that I'm going to throw a lot of slides at you tonight. I've tried my best to condense this down, knowing that it's one presentation. What we'll do is the first part, I'm going to look back at the current year and kind of help you understand where we're ending. We're in the last 30 days of our budget year. I think understanding that we're going to finish strong in a good financial position is important to understanding what we do going into the next 12 months. And then the main thing and why this is, I think for most city managers, this is kind of like our Christmas, we say, because we get to celebrate our staff and talk about some successes. So if you will, indulge me. I enjoy showing these highlights. So this is truly a year to celebrate some accomplishments. We have a number of new projects and initiatives that have launched in this year. You'll remember we dedicated the Limbaugh Animal Shelter, had the inaugural season of our Farmers Market Tullahoma. It's actually continuing right now every Monday night at South Jackson Square Park and has been a phenomenal success. I actually would love for us this month to recognize the market manager, Lynn Atelski. From the inaugural season where we had no money budgeted and we just did everything on a shoestring and the best that we could, this year we've actually, with Rosemary Golden's help, established a permitting process, and our farmers market is self-sufficient, meaning actually profitable, in the amount that they raised in permits this year is more than what we have spent in advertising. So really proud of the work that she's done in putting this together and making it a success from day one. This year, Mayor Curley launched a new initiative, as he has done every year, this time creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Tullahoma. And we are working the vision to become Tennessee's capital for rural entrepreneurs. We welcome 2 new aldermen to the board, Alderman Berry and Alderman Blackwell. We hired the city's first IT manager, David Jernigan, sorry. And he has really been working hard at upgrading all of our computers, security patches, making everything much more reliable, getting us ready for higher speed internet, which I'm very excited for, and Office 365 that will help us to share files and work more efficiently together. We hired a new superintendent in Public Works, Eric Pierce. You remember him, I think only person I met from Shelbyville with a Boston accent, and hired a new police chief, Jason Williams. He just finished his 6 months of probation, and I think we'll keep him. He's doing a great job. He's really honored all his commitments to engage with our police officers and be very approachable and make what I would say a huge culture change in that department. We began online permitting and credit card acceptance at Planning and Codes, finished up downtown repairs and paving, and as you know, we're starting construction of a new park at Silver Street. We also have a lot of community partnerships and have had a lot of visitors to Tullahoma this year. We hosted AOPA's regional fly-in, being the only city to have ever been selected twice to host that international event. And then I don't want to steal any of Tom's thunder. You'll hear from TAEDC next Monday night. But I did want to say we've had a number of successes in bringing jobs to the community. Enable Comp was a Franklin-based company that expanded to Tullahoma and has brought 200 new jobs. TE Connectivity announced a $15 million expansion this year, creating over 100 jobs in the next 3 years. And as we can see, those things are still on track. Hobby Lobby's announced taking over a part of the Kmart building. Can't wait to see that. And we continue to offer our business loan programs. I think last time I checked, we had over 20 active loans through that program. We're still watching in anticipation for Parkview Tullahoma to finish construction, but that's been an exciting project to watch come together. And then, as you know, I think our fire department does a great job every year, but I was really intrigued with these statistics. Over the last 5 years, there's been a 36% reduction in structure fires. And to me, that speaks to the great work of our inspection, our fire marshals, and then all the work that they do in this community to really educate people and get out the word about how to build safely, safe construction practices, and then also our free smoke alarm program where they've given out over 4,100 smoke alarms in this community. At the same time, I wanted to recognize that their calls for medical response have increased 65%. So the EMT advanced incentive pay that we started this year, I think is really important because it shows where their work is evolving to. It's more and more medical emergencies. And we've made sure that we continue to fund that in this year's budget. Again, lots of good community partnerships to celebrate. We had.
You missed one on the previous page.
Oh, did I?
I'm not sure. Well, I thought I saw about the new park on East Lincoln Street.
That was on the first one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So in here, just talked about the community partnership, the quick response that we had to make repairs at Johnson Lane. And we've been excited to open that back up recently. We're also continuing, like I said, technology is a big one, so we're continuing to upgrade our financial management system. We finished that Avoca Road and Riley Creek traffic study, which we hope to have funding sometime in the future to pay for those near-term improvements. And we had an additional $50,000 that we put into street paving this last year. Just recently completed a lot of that work. We've completed the CD Stamps roof and HVAC replacements, and we finished our first year of a 15-year Americans with Disabilities Accessibility Transition Plan. So a lot to celebrate. And Alderman Dunn mentioned a lot of the successes with Go Green. I didn't know if you remembered, but that was a great partnership there where we had a local artist paint a student's drawing about encouraging recycling and reducing your impact. And then I have to mention this year, Tullahoma's name recognition, I think, has skyrocketed as Dustin Lynch debuted his new album. It came out number 4 on Billboard's Top Country Albums chart. I remember Chief Chastain got to be on, what was it, the Top Hot Country Top 100?
Top 20.
Top 20? See?
Number 1.
Yeah, so we're becoming a household name, guys. That's what I'm telling you. Very exciting. We also saw Machine Falls at Short Springs. They were selected for the Tennessee Vacation Guide cover. And we've released new branding for our downtown, new marketing brochures for the region that we're setting out. Well, we've got to get them printed first, but they'll be out at all of the visitor centers and destinations, like Jack Daniels has agreed to put it in theirs. We are continuing to apply for grant funding for a number of projects and have been selected and are participating in the Innovation Academy with 10 other communities in the TVA region, continuing to move that entrepreneurship initiative forward. And then most recently, you may have seen this news release where a think tank called Heartland Forward released a study. Tullahoma, Manchester metropolitan area ranked in the very top of the Heartland region, which is America, not the coast, but the middle of America, very top in job creation by small businesses and entrepreneurs. And they specifically noted us as number 1 in the region for our concentration of people with bachelor's degrees and above opening those businesses. So it's really exciting. We feel like it just underpins exactly the efforts that we are saying that we have the assets and the talent here to really be the capital for entrepreneurs in Tennessee. So we're very excited. And then you remember we had our groundbreaking ceremony on the Tullahoma Police Department. So they are very quickly building out that second floor as we speak. Now, that was the look back. Looking forward, I think it's best to start with a review of our budget goals. Just the overview, our proposed budget is a balanced budget. Now, local governments are legally required to pass a balanced budget, but we are very intentional, I like to point out, in managing our future expenses to what we anticipate our revenues to be. We do anticipate this coming year, as I've told you before, to use some of the city's fund balance, but we have done that in levels consistent with our financial policies. And generally, our budget is contributing to these strategic objectives. We want to be fiscally responsible, responsive, and effective government, creating a vibrant and diverse economy that is safe, sustainable, and a healthy community. So that is what we're trying to do with our budget. Next, talk about revenues. Like I said, that's where we start. If we don't know how much money we're going to have, we can't talk about how we're going to spend it. So we start with our major funds. As you can see, sales tax, property tax, and then those tax equivalents, like the pilot that you passed tonight from TUA, those make up roughly 80% of all our revenues that we collect in a year. That's why we talk so much about property tax and sales tax and how they're affecting us. The other 20% come from those state shared taxes that are shared back to us at a per capita rate. And then things like the wholesale beer and liquor and all other revenue. So all other charges, fees, interest income, court fines, all of those things make up that last 10%. With only a month remaining in this fiscal year, you will recall we amended the budget and we've already reduced it down 2.5%, about $760,000. That was to reflect that our property taxes are coming in about 2% below anticipated. Now, we may still collect some of that revenue. We have seen it seems like there's a higher number of delinquent payments this year. But also, I think we feel like we're still feeling the ramifications of losing Goodrich and their property tax dollars in the community. So that's why you see property tax revenue is flat right now. And in our budget, we had anticipated a 2% growth. Sales tax, we anticipated 4%. We're actually up about 5%. We still have 2 months of sales tax collections to receive, but it's been interesting to watch. We're cautiously optimistic. In March, I want to say this right, in May, we collected the revenue from sales in March. And across the state, they were down about 1%. In Tullahoma, we were up 5%. I think Coffee County was up even more than that, about 12%. So probably because we had it better last year than they did, that's my guess. But it's still so volatile. There is no crystal ball on this. We have no actual experience. March sales reflected a normal 2 weeks and then a very not normal 2 weeks where COVID was going on. People were being told to stay home. Some people were buying things online. Other people were hoarding. So we're not sure how reliable these figures are going to be. Also, like you know, hotels were doing tremendously. We had visitors, and then doors were shut. So we're seeing that reflected in hotel motel tax. It's trending down about 15% right now, and business taxes are down. Some of the reason business taxes are down is the state has extended payment deadlines. So we still don't have a good read on whether we'll receive those and credit them to this fiscal year or we'll receive them and credit them to next fiscal year. It's kind of an up in the air right now. And then licenses and permits are up. I really attribute that to the fact that we raised our fees effective January 1 of this year. I don't think it's volume, I think it's really just a reflection of that. We've kind of steady volume and we've increased our fees. I also wanted to remind you that last year we had anticipated using some of our fund balance. We had a really strong last year. We had a really strong beginning of this year, this fiscal year before COVID-19. And we had anticipated using some of our city reserves to fund some one-time projects. Now with COVID, in March, what we immediately did is start some cost containment strategies. So we put a hiring freeze in place. That meant that any position that was vacant was not filled. We restricted purchasing. We had no new capital expenditures. So all those things went unspent. We haven't hired any of our seasonal part-time. Right now, especially gearing up for Splash Island, we would have been hiring about 100 to 150 part-time employees. We haven't hired any of those this year. We also reduced hours for part-time employees pretty significantly. So now we're at a position where at the end of year, we estimate we will only need between $200,000 and $300,000 out of our reserves. That is very much like a typical year. I guess the one thing that's different is we would have pulled $200,000 or $300,000 and bought vehicles and equipment with it at the end of the year, where in this case we're using it to fill kind of a hole in our operating budget. But I still feel very good about where we're ending and that we've been able to reduce that quite a bit. Talking again about the state, normally, again, atypical budget year, I'm not usually focused on what the state's doing, but this year, across the state, the governor is telling departments to cut 12% from each of their budgets to anticipate no growth or declining growth in their revenues. They're seeing unemployment numbers lag by about 4 months. So these numbers are from March, the very beginning, and Coffee County had a 22% unemployment rate. It's anticipated when the April numbers come out that they will look even worse. Now, I'm still of the opinion that I think they look worse and then they recover pretty quickly, but we don't know. So I just want to share this information with you. You have the same information that I do. It's very difficult to estimate revenues in a time like this or try to anticipate how people will spend, what consumers are going to do, how sales tax is going to look in a time like this. We do know, this is another slide from the state economists, we do know that it significantly affected almost all industries and some more than others. I don't think you'll be surprised by any of these. Arts, entertainment, recreation, hotels and food services greatly impacted, manufacturing, our retailers, and then health and social services. Especially, remember, these are March figures. So back then, all elective type surgeries were canceled, all dentists, eye doctors, everybody was closed. So they've been severely impacted. One thing I will say is just because of all the uniqueness around what this recession looks like and the unpredictability of it, I don't think you'll be surprised to learn that the proposed budget has been built with a lot of restraint in it. There's very little new. I passed out the budget highlights to you and the things that are new, and they fit neatly on one sheet of paper. I mean, that's pretty unusual, I would say. But there's very little new or difference in this year's budget. We've cut at least $10,000 from every single city department and our friends, our Tullahoma Airport and TAEDC. So everyone has shared in this burden. And then this was intentional to pass a very lean, a very base budget, and for us to continue to restrain our spending for at least the next 4 months until we get some actual revenue collections experience behind us, and then we can take a look in the fall at if we can make some additions back in. So some of the things that were cut, can we add those back in? Some of the priority needs that were not funded, can we put those back in? I kind of said it's like we're going to eat ramen and peanut butter and jelly right now, and hopefully we can have steak later. Looking ahead, I'm really hopeful that locally the impact is going to be much less than these statewide averages. and we will be able to add back in many areas. We're just going to do that when we have the revenues actually in hand, rather than anticipating them and being wrong. It's certainly been a challenging time and to forecast revenues. And again, I'm really proud of this team that has worked together, especially our finance director, Sue Wilson. And I feel like all of the essential needs are met right now. Okay, so property taxes. No property tax rate increase has been proposed in this budget. We're not asking for that. As you know, Tullahoma has not raised property taxes in 20 years, except for 2 times. And the last time was in 2013 after a reappraisal. And at that time, all of the increase was dedicated to school debt and capital improvements for schools. It's my commitment to this board. I'll continue to work at reducing the property tax burden in Tullahoma. I've provided these illustrations. I want to show you that since fiscal year 19, the city has reduced both the property tax rate and has reduced it in real dollars. The average home's property tax bill is about 4.5% less today than it was in 2018. And that's a result of us maintaining the rate that we have. Meanwhile, some values are going up. And the other thing about property tax revenues I wanted to remind you is that they're growing pretty slowly because we only receive increases when we have new developments or remodels that add additional new square footage. We are, again, experiencing a higher than typical number of delinquent and late tax payments this year. And we're hopeful that there's some significant new developments like Parkview Tullahoma that will come on to the tax rolls in this next year. And when we see that, we'll be able to adjust that. Okay, sales tax. I thought last year at this time I was showing you how, based upon our trend, this was expected to be the first year that sales tax dollars collected will surpass property tax dollars collected. And while we still are waiting to see how the year ends, just a projection, I think we'll meet that. I still think we'll meet that this year. Heading into next year, we have forecasted a change in that pattern. Again, like I said, we're taking a base budget approach. If real numbers come in more, we'll add money back. But just not planning to spend money we don't have. This represents a 3% cut from the actual collections of 2019. It's about a 2% reduction off of our amended budget of 2020. But the reason why I wanted you to see it against actuals is we've already amended the FY20 budget down once. So it's really a significant drop in sales tax that we're anticipating in this budget. Okay. Here's a summary just across the board. I've talked to you about the largest revenue sources. Across the board, we're predicting a lot of these other numbers are based on MTAS and recommendations from the state. So property taxes holding flat again for next year. Local sales taxes down 3% from actual collections in fiscal year 19. Business taxes down 10%. Hotel motel taxes down about 20%. I think tourism is going to continue to be impacted for several months. State shared taxes are down 7.7%. And then we're watching that hall income tax, which has been about a $200,000 revenue at times for the city. That's fully phased out beginning January 1 of 2021. So I also wanted to share with you, we recognize what's happening in our business community and want to support them. And so we have not asked for any increase this year to any of our fees for services. But in commercial garbage collection, we signed we participated in a collective new contract with ISWA that's increased the cost of that service by about $16,000 a year. And we're not asking for an increase this year, but I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you about that increase in cost. And since we haven't increased fees in 5 years now, it would be likely that in a better year, we're going to recommend an adjustment to those fees. Here, switching gears on you, go into spending to give you an overview of how we spend the tax dollars. It kind of falls into these big categories. Of course, education is our top priority in Tullahoma. They get about 40% in a good year. This year it fell to about 39%. The other half goes to city operations. Some goes out of the general fund and gets transferred to support solid waste. And then that green slice is the transfers to our chamber, nonprofits, airport, TAEDC, and then any capital projects. And that piece is very small this year for the proposed budget. Like I told you, there are no new capital projects in this budget. The only possible capital project, and I'll show you that, is our comprehensive land use plan update, which I have asked for $100,000 to go towards that effort. It may not be enough, but we have to start somewhere in getting that plan updated. And I thought, you know, if you give me something to work with, we'll find a way to make it work, and we may carry the project over multiple budget years to make that funding work. Okay, if you would like to see a little more detail, so I showed you here 50% is city operations. When you break it down into its smaller parts, you can see, and I like to share this to the public just to give them an idea of how their tax dollars are spent even more. So out of that, about 23% goes to public safety. Makes sense, they're doing 24/7 operations. It's a costly service that we provide. Public works, parks and recreation are the next largest. We value those things, especially our recycling. And general government at 8%, that represents almost every other city department. So all of our support, administration, finance, HR, IT, everyone else falls into that category. Planning and codes. Okay. And then going into this year's budget, I passed out highlights to you. As you can see, kind of broken it into three main categories. This year's budget, one of the ways that we've contained cost is we have to look at our salaries and benefits. We're a service organization. That's what we do. We don't make things. We provide services, and we need people to do that. So it probably won't surprise you to know that personnel costs are about 70% of our expenses. So there have been some needed reductions in budgeted positions to make this budget work. We're not currently funding most equipment or vehicle replacements. We're not funding any new requests or capital projects. And I think there will be some impacts to our services, but we've kept them, like I keep saying, to the essential services are there. We have put in step raises for our city compensation plan. We have not made any adjustments for cost of living. So we always watch the index on that. This kind of economy, it's not a good time to even look at that, but it's trending under 1%. So for right now, we're not recommending any change to that. This also happens to be a year that we did a market study. So with the type of plan that we have, about every 5 years, you should take some of your jobs and go out and test them, make sure that they're still competitive with the market, and we did that this year. And because of our strong raises and how we have funded the plan every year, we still are on target. I think if we can get through this year and continue to have about a 3 or 3.5% raise next year, we will stay competitive with the market. We also have had a really great year. Again, this is not my credit. This is a credit to the health and wellness of our employees, the work that Human Resources does with our Wellness Committee and our Safety Committee. We have had a great year, and our health insurance plan costs, there's no increase to either on the employer side or the employee side. No changes proposed. Our general liability expenses, our workers' comp expenses, all of those are flat or returning dividends to us. So we've had a great year in terms of that. We've limited funding for special events in this budget. I'm sure you imagine we're not going to be doing as many concerts in the park and things like that we would typically do. And we have tried to continue a priority on our programs. So while we've had to reduce funding across the board, we did still keep funding for the Entrepreneur Initiative, Go Green, our Tennessee Downtowns program, our Arts Council, our Tourism Council, and our outside agencies. As I say, I think retaining our talented employees and being attractive for new employees is our top priority. So we've got to make good on the commitment to fund our step increases. That is in the plan. The other side of the coin is, in addition to salaries, we've got to have competitive benefits. And so I put this slide in here just to kind of remind you once a year of all the benefits that we do offer for our employees. We also had some good news recently that Delta Dental, recognizing challenges that are going on across the country, they are giving employees back a 25% credit on their last 2 months of premiums. So it's something small, but it's very noticeable. We also, public entity partners, that's the city's insurance carrier, they have come up, their board passed I want to say a $7 million program, emergency relief program for cities, and they've sent us, or intend to send us, a dividend check of about $40,000. So every little bit helps, and I think we're very appreciative of these vendors helping us during this time. Okay. Now, in addition to talking about turnover and top talent, turnover and retaining our police officers beyond 5 years of service has been a significant challenge for many years. This year, I'm really proud to present to you a recommendation from our police department that I think should finally help us address this competitiveness gap and help us be a top employer of choice for police officers. Chief Williams, this hasn't been an easy discussion, especially in this environment, but he's in agreement that we use salary savings from eliminating a vacant sergeant position in our investigations division. You guys remember Sergeant Harry Conway that left us to go up to Alaska and live I think a lifelong dream to go to Alaska. We never backfilled that position. And so it can help us transition from 8-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts. And I think it's a fair trade-off in this environment. The transition, what it would do is currently we have employees scheduled on 3 8-hour shifts to cover the 24 hours. They'll move to 2 12-hour shifts with an A and B rotation on each of those. This change is the single most requested policy change from existing employees. And before Chief Williams got here, I had personally reviewed 5 years of exit interviews to kind of understand what the issues were. This was the most frequently mentioned item that came up as a recommendation for us to look at. And that was on top of the fact that I was very proud to see across the board, they said our pay and benefits are competitive. But to see people that we had trained and had so much promise and hope for their growth here, to see them leave, and sometimes leave for less money because they were saying they wanted to have the opportunity to get weekends off with their families. They wanted to work the 12-hour shifts. We had to pay attention to it. When Chief Williams got here, it was around the same time that I was fortunate. Alderman Blackwell helped Nathan Watkins find his way to me. He was an intern that worked with me for a semester. The project I had him working on was to do a survey of all the law enforcement agencies in this area. And across, I believe it was 18 to 20 agencies, only 2 were on 8-hour shifts. Only 2 others were on 10-hour shifts. Everyone else was on 12 hours. And at the same time as we were doing the recruitment for the chief, I remember talking to the MTAS police consultant, Rex Barton, about it. And he said, regardless of what you think about 12-hour shifts, if everyone else is doing it, you have to do it. You're not going to be competitive. You're not going to be able to recruit the best. And that's what I wouldn't say that we're recruiting some good people. I don't want that to be misunderstood. But in terms of volume, we get very little applicants compared to what we should be getting, especially at the fact that we offer very competitive pay and benefits. So I am very optimistic and excited for us to make this change. I know it's going to be a huge morale boost to our police department. I think it will, in the long run, it should help us in so many ways. Some of the benefits of this new scheduling are that there should be less need for overtime to cover short shifts or events that extend beyond shift change. Communication should be improved between day and night shifts, and supervision over the shift will be more consistent with everyone within a dedicated shift working the same days and having the same days off. And generally, officers are supportive of working the longer shifts because they like that they'll work fewer days per year, have more decompression time away from the job, and they'll have consistent days off, including some weekends. So that was really important to get this into this year's budget. I wanted to show you, I did this last year, I think it's interesting. It's across the board, all of the department requests for funding. We had a little over $2 million in requests, and we found a way to fund about $1 million of those requests. Now, this isn't all from the general fund. This is $1 million spread out across the general fund, our equipment reserves, and transfers to capital projects fund. So I think that was one of your questions, Alderman Blackwell. In government, we have fund accounting. So Sue and I will go over it with you, but we have lots of different funds, lots of different buckets of money. The general fund is the largest one and the one that we're typically referring to. That's where all of the tax-supported services are. So, all right. I'll not belabor this point too much because you have it in front of you, but some of the highlights, I really just try to highlight things that are variances, things that are changes from prior year budgets. And there were 2 projects specifically that I felt like were top priorities of this board, and I made sure that those got into this budget. And that is developing a new city website. I will be right there with all of you to say that we could do a much better job of having a user-friendly website that's got better content and more information on it, that's providing online forms, online payment opportunities, all those things. And so while we may not be able to do a lot in this budget, if we can accomplish that, I think it's well worth the money spent. The other is the comprehensive plan. And those of you that I think nearly all of you have been on Planning Commission at one point or another, you understand the difficulty when you have recommendations coming in front of you that are consistent with a plan, and then you look at that plan and you say, what, this is terrible. Whose plan is this? And you don't, so it's outdated. Comprehensive plans need to be updated. I think ours is from 2011. It's time. It's really past time. And again, while this is a difficult year to find money for anything, I think we've got to get started on that. If we want to be successful at supporting business development, land development, we've got to work on that. It's really the top priority project. Okay, and then I think I've driven it home. There's not any new capital projects, but I did want to share with you, we've completed these projects in the last year out of our capital projects fund. The Collins Greenway Sidewalk Connector Project, Community Mobility Plan, North Jackson Streetscape Plan, and the new roof and HVAC systems at CD Stamps. These are projects still underway. The new police department, Cedar Lane sidewalks, that's a TDOT project. It's going to be several years, and we are just at the beginning, still in that environmental phase. The new park, the sidewalks we discussed for Avoca Road and Kings Lane. Now that is still in the design and right-of-way, and that's all that we have funded at this time is design and right-of-way. And you'll remember back in February, we wanted to hold community meetings and get people out to get those right-of-way forms signed, and here we are in the time of COVID and haven't been able to do that. But we'll get back to being able to do those things again. And then I put in the comprehensive land use plan. I put this slide in here just to share with you. There's a lot of future capital projects. I have not begun to list all of them, but there's some that I just want to put on your radar that are hanging out there for future funding at whatever time we're able to fund them. Repaving of Cedar Lane is a big one. Replacement of the dehumidifier at the indoor pool. I forget, I think it has maybe a 15-year, 20-year life on it, but we're getting toward the end of that life cycle. The sidewalks for Avoca Road and Kings Lane, we've got to fund the construction of those sidewalks. The south side of South Jackson parking improvements. Avoca Road, like I said, we did this traffic study. We haven't implemented the near-term safety improvements yet. They continue funding the ADA transition plan. That's going to be every year for the next 15 years. We haven't started any of the physical improvements under the North Jackson Streetscape plan. There's lots of needs in downtown Tullahoma. As you know, we have acquired some properties down there. We need to spend some money on improvements. City facility building maintenance, I would say that's across the board, but especially City Hall comes to mind as we move the police into their new building, what to do with the space that's left. We need to start looking at that. And then William Northern, we have a future project. Obviously, I think several of you have noticed the increase in traffic, and we expect even more as Parkview Tullahoma opens. And I'm sure I'll hear from those wanting a signal at that intersection. So now's the time to start thinking about designing that intersection and where the future roadway should be. And we've started looking at it a little bit because of the Cedar Lane sidewalk project. So we've been designing those sidewalks to where we think the future William Northern will be. And then lots of improvements at city parks and at Short Springs have been requested over the years, so I put that there. Keep that on our radar. Okay, some streets capital projects. And their various stages. Again, most of those are TDOT projects. They're 5+ years or more in development. I will leave it with this. We're on first reading tonight. Next Monday, we'll have second reading and presentations from the independent agencies. Our Tullahoma City Schools will be here. Our brand new schools director, Dr. Stevens, will be here with Jason Ray. I've had the pleasure of meeting her. I cannot wait for all of you to meet her. I think she's going to be phenomenal. We'll have Tom Robinson representing the Tullahoma Area Economic Development Corporation and John Glass with the Airport Authority. And then on June 22nd, we'll have our final reading of the budget. The mayor will read his mayor's budget message, and any topics that we haven't discussed, I'll be prepared to discuss with you. So, do you have any questions at this time?
One, go ahead.
In reference to Splash Out,
Mm-hmm.
when are you going to, or are we going to open Splash Island this year? We've got a brand new facility, and it's just sitting there.
That is true. So I will say, and I'm glad Kurt's here, he's heard me say it to him, but I'm glad to say it publicly. Of all the departments, Parks and Recreation has been the single most impacted by this virus and by the financial constraints we're under. They rely so heavily on part-time employees. During this time, we actually closed the community centers. That meant we furloughed 42 part-time employees. Now that CD Stamps was still having their roof construction, so we've kept it closed. But even when we opened D.W. Wilson, we're running it only on full-time staff. And we have moved staff around, so a staff person that would normally have been doing concessions is doing maintenance work or sitting at the front desk. So it's a lot of operational changes have gone on in Parks and Recreation. We have been able to keep open the indoor pool because of our full-time staff and only needing a couple of part-time lifeguards to come back. And fortunately, their certificates were either still valid or could be extended. But for the outdoor pool, on a normal day, we need 12 lifeguards every shift. And the American Red Cross is not certifying new lifeguards right now. And like I told you, we have not hired any seasonal staff. So while I'm not able to fill full-time vacant positions, I have not gone in and hired any part-time employees either. And that is part of the way that we've been able to end this year without a larger use of fund balance. So those are the trade-offs. Like I said, it hasn't impacted all service areas equally. It has significantly impacted Parks and Recreation.
Then probably the swimming pool will not open. Probably.
I'm like you. My heart does not want to say those words. I am very concerned about our ability to get lifeguards and staff to be able to open the pool.
What
this
about our
year.
baseball facilities? I know now sparingly they can be used.
Yes. Actually, Kurt Glick, our Parks Director, is spending a lot of his time right now talking to some different tournaments and leagues about how they get back on the fields and how we operate safely.
How are they doing that, Kurt? What are the people around us doing?
You want to come up here, Kurt, so they can get you on the microphone?
From what I've been able to find out with calling some people around and checking with them, everybody is starting to slowly let tournaments come back, and we just got okay a week ago that we could open up the fields to non-contact sports. Non-contact sports meaning baseball and softball would be one. Other sports such as football and basketball are still not allowed. But so you can imagine everybody is just waiting to get on the fields to play baseball and softball. So I got them opened immediately within an hour of which we got the call from the governor. So they started practicing on them now, and I also almost immediately that weekend, last weekend, started getting calls about can we have a tournament here. So we've got a process in place that they can put in requests, and then we're asking that they provide us some information about what they're going to do to help operate the tournament in a safe manner as prescribed in the governor's Tennessee promise plan. So we're taking those requests now. We've got possibly 3 tournaments in the process of trying to get scheduled now. So we're bringing those on. I think some of the increased tournament use is because people are doing the travel ball in lieu of, since all their leagues were pretty much canceled for the year. So we're kind of anticipating a lot more tournament activity. So we're trying to get a handle on getting that scheduled now. So hopefully everything will go well and will continue to go well. They'll release more use of the fields and sports, and we'll get back to normal.
Do you see, yay or nay, that Little League will be opening this year?
The Little League, they canceled their regular season, but they're going to have, the last I've heard and talked to them, they're planning an extended fall season.
Oh, okay.
So they're just kind of moving it to the fall. It won't be like official Little League baseball because it has to occur in that time frame, but they normally play a fall season that only lasts about a month, but I think they're going to plan on doubling that and having a little longer fall season, which would be nice. So that could be a ripple effect of some impacts of some other sports, such as Frank Mullins football or soccer. When you start moving spring sports to the fall, that could have some effects on other leagues, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens there.
Have you heard anything, of course I'm out of that loop now, about high school football and things like that?
I think they're still planning on playing. I haven't heard any definitive thing that they're not going to play, but I know that they're going to start practicing and things like that. So no contact practices and stuff like that, I believe.
It's hard to do with football, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Well, I guess I got to get in shape first. So.
Okay, I didn't know that about Little League. I didn't know that they had called it off until the fall.
Right, yeah, they did. It started, as it got extended and extended, the normal Little League, National Little League in Williamsport said that they were canceling it and not having the series. So, because all the Little League games traditionally had to be finished by in June, to get ready for the tournament play to get into the World Series. So it just didn't leave anybody enough time with the restrictions from the pandemic. So they decided so National Little League decided not to have it this year, so they extended, so Little League decided not to have the regular season and then just have an extended fall.
So what you're saying also is that probably we're gonna go back to like it was when I was young, we're gonna go to the creek and swim. Because you're not gonna have one to swim here.
Well,
It's not gonna happen, they're not gonna allow it.
Let's hope, that we'll be optimistic, cautiously optimistic, and hope we can get back and get things going. We'll do everything we can at Parks and Rec to do the best we can to get everybody here, everything we can do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
Will the individual departments be presenting differently at a different time, or is this
They
the
will
time?
not.
I have a question on the high school fields. Do we pay to maintain those? Do they pay us at all to maintain those? Is that all out of our?
Yeah, that's all out of ours. We maintain the high school athletic fields for them. They do not pay us to do that.
Have we ever?
At one time, several years ago, probably, it's been a lot of years ago, maybe 20 years ago, we had an agreement with them where they paid us $15,000 a year. That happened maybe 2 years, and then it never happened again. I don't know what happened to the agreement, but that's the only time I know of that they paid.
Does it take a lot of our staff's time to maintain these?
It's very high maintenance areas, yeah. And we take pride in doing the best we can for them. They deserve it, but it is a lot of time out of our day that it takes from other activities.
Would that be something, I know everybody's hurting, but to consider in the future is looking at some sort of, I know it's all city taxpayer dollars, but still some sort of compensation there. Another question is, I saw, it just says vehicles for Parks and Rec. Is this going to be some of the trucks? I know we got some trucks that are lacking paint and
This
heat
year
and
actually
everything.
put together a 5-year replacement plan for his fleet of vehicles in Parks and Recreation. And this would fund year 1 of that request. And the first vehicles, it had several, maybe 5 vehicles that will be surplus, that are more the high mileage, high maintenance cost vehicles. And 2 new trucks would be purchased that would support our maintenance crew.
So Parks and Rec does an excellent job maintaining all the fields. In fact, I believe Mathis Field has been recognized at least once, baseball field, Mathis Field, by the Field of the Year in Tennessee. Is that
We
right?
won the athletic field of the year.
Yeah, for the whole state.
Yeah, y'all do incredible.
Yeah.
The staff is incredible. I'm just curious how much of our city time goes into maintaining those school fields and what it takes away. And
Let's see, Dr. Blanks, you had a question?
Real quick, more a comment than a question. On those things that eventually we're going to have to fund, capital projects. Kurt had put down the dehumidifier at the indoor pool. I would encourage us greatly to look at that because we had to redo the indoor pool, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, because the dehumidifier went down and, the whole interior corroded. So you have to really look at that as a proactive, being farsighted and know you got to plan on that, replacing that, because if you don't, in 20 years, you'll have to replace the whole thing, and that was expensive. So I would encourage everybody that's looking at that down the road that we need to. Would you not concur with that?
Yeah, I've kind of been reminding of that every year here for the last couple of years, to say, we still have a significant amount of time left on the lifespan of it, and we're doing above and beyond what the call for maintenance is to extend its life as far as possible. But I didn't want it to catch us flat-footed. When it goes out, it needs to be replaced. So I just wanted everybody to kind of be aware.
Thank you for that heads up. And thank you for getting us all prepped. I know it takes a lot of work to get this budget stuff together, and plus on a COVID year, it's not easy.
Thank you for saying that, and I want to be sure to thank all of you for your support and this leadership team, and then some people specifically, Sue Wilson and Donna Graham, that do a lot of the heavy lifting, putting the budget numbers together and recommending, working with side by side with department heads about where their spending is, where they can cut, what about this, what about that. And she does a great job at finding ways to help people get what they need. Also, Costa Bryce with our personnel, and David Jernigan, our outside agencies, John Glass, Tom Robinson, and Jason Ray. So, thank you so much.
I thought it was an excellent presentation, very well done. And,
A bit on the long side, admittedly. I warned you.
Okay, this is
Thank
the
you.
first of 3 readings. The only one that really counts is the third one. Okay, so, but this is necessary. So we have a motion and a second. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of first reading of ordinance number 1540, vote green, opposed, vote red. Has everyone voted?
There we go.
Motion passes 7-0. Ms. Moody, are you aware of any other business? All right, we will adjourn and go immediately. In the Beer Board, we have one item, the consent agenda, BB15. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Proper motion by Dr. Blank, seconded by Mr. Mathis. All those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, vote green, opposed, vote red. Motion, whoops.
Hold on 1 second. Okay, let's try it again.
All those in favor, vote green, opposed, vote red.
Alderman Berry needs to vote. There you go.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
It was, as Dr. Blank said earlier, it was really good to see everybody here. I hope everybody stays safe, and we'll see you 1 week from tonight. Thank you.